horror movie monsters are only as good as the heroes that oppose them. So, who are the best of the best when it comes to horror movie heroes? Hey movie fans, so I know we're still a long way off from October and talking about the great horror and Halloween themed movies, but this is a topic that I thought would be an interesting one to go over. With the new Halloween on the horizon, we're not only going to get the return of Michael Myers, but we're going to get the return of Laurie Strode, one of the best, heroines in a horror film. I really latch on to Laurie Strode. She's a really great character. So that got me thinking, what other great heroes / heroines are there in the genre of horror? So that's what we're going to discuss today. The top 5 horror movie heroes. Kicking us off at number 5 is the only character on this list that actually has the distinction of being played by 3 different actors, but it's the same character. And that is Tommy Jarvis from the Friday the 13th franchise. Introduced first in Friday the 13th Part 4, The Final Chapter, which is actually titled that because at the time they thought it would be the final one. Oh, how wrong they were. But Tommy Jarvis was first introduced in Part 4 as a young boy, played by Corey Feldman, who actually doesn't have that much of a role in Friday the 13th Part 4, but it's ultimately the one that actually ends up defeating Jason Voorhees by shaving his head and adopting more or less the look that kid Jason had before he died. It's a weird tactic, but it ends up working. Driven to being paranoid, he more or less goes into this weird, rehab place. He's not nearly as dynamic in 5 as he is in 4, but it's nice to have a recurring character, and Corey Feldman actually returned as a cameo of a young version of Tommy Jarvis at the beginning of 5, so it's nice to have that continuity in a series that otherwise has really wonky continuity. But to me, the best version of Tommy Jarvis appears in my personal favorite of the Friday the 13th films, Friday the 13th Part 6, which is basically Tommy Jarvis fully realized versus a fully realized Jason Voorhees. So Tommy Jarvis is paranoid that Jason Voorhees may come back to life. So he checks on the body. The body's fine. The body's completely dead. He stabs it a couple times with a metal spike just to make sure. But in the process, he accidentally brings Jason Voorhees back to life. So he's got to track down Jason one more time and finally defeat him once and for all. He's an actually interesting and dynamic character that in the franchise of Friday the 13th, these characters are mainly cannon fodder. You want to see them all die in creative ways. Tommy Jarvis is not that. You actually want him to win the day and beat Jason Voorhees. The people that surrounds Tommy are interesting and dynamic. I think that's one reason why Friday the 13th Part 6 is as good as it is. It's just a lot of fun, and just having a really strong hero for the first time going up against a very strong villain, and Jason Voorhees, made for a lot of fun, and I just liked any scene with Tommy Jarvis on board. So, the next Friday the 13th film will be the 13th in the franchise. So, could we possibly have Tommy Jarvis return, as well as any other survivors from the previous film, to once and for all destroy Jason Voorhees? I think that'd be a cool idea. Whether or not we'll actually get another Friday the 13th at this point due to the ongoing legal battle is another issue, but we'll see. At number 4, we have Ash from the Evil Dead franchise. This is more or less what launched Bruce Campbell's career into just that awesome Bruce Campbell-esque character that he always ends up playing, more likely than not, in a Sam Raimi movie, and this is where it all started. So, more or less, Evil Dead is about a bunch of teenagers that go into the woods that accidentally unleash a whole bunch of demonic forces because they read from the Necronomicon, which, why would you read from this book? Does that not emanate evil? But whatever. And to be fair, in the first Evil Dead, Ash is not that interesting of a character. He's kind of a whiner, he's kind of just, But when we get to Evil Dead 2, that's where Bruce Campbell starts to have fun. This dude goes off the walls in terms of bonkers, insanity, cutting off his own hand because his hand starts to get possessed. So he cuts off his own hand. He has this little exchange with his hand. Then the iconic he's just a fantastic character. He's just Bruce Campbell as Bruce Campbell-esque best, to the point that he even got a TV show with Ash vs. the Evil Dead, which unfortunately got canceled fairly recently, but I believe it had either 2 or 3 successful seasons. It carried on the legacy of Ash and the Evil Dead franchise. It was just a lot of fun. Ash is such a cool character. Even if you haven't seen the Evil Dead franchise, you recognize Bruce Campbell with the chainsaw at hand. He's a ton of fun. He's not your stereotypical horror movie hero, and that's why he earns a spot on this list. At number 3, we actually had the most recent character that's developed from this list in terms of being fairly new, but actually this film franchise started over 20 years ago, which just is insane to me. And that is Sidney Prescott from the Scream films. I loved the character of Sidney right from when she was first introduced in Scream 1. So we're introduced to this more or less damsel in distress, or at least you think. So we already saw the character of Drew Barrymore killed at the beginning of Scream 1. So the same premise gets set up of stranger calls some girl that's all by herself in the house. You think she's gonna die. Sidney actually has outsmarted the killer at every turn, including from the opening scene. She knows all the horror tropes. She knows every trope there is in previous horror films of what to do and what not to do. And she's actually incredibly smart at every turn of the killer will be like, I'm at your front door. So logically, you'd think the dumb girl would go running back. But no, she calls the killer's bluff, goes straight to the front door, opens it, there's no one there because of course the killer was just trying to scare her. So she then, in return, starts taunting the Ghostface killer. At that moment, and this is just the first one, mind you, I was totally on board with the character of Sidney Prescott. She gets even better and better in the sequels to come, as just later in the first one, she even calls the killer, like the killer called her, more or less taunting her. She's not afraid to taunt the villain in any of the films, which I always appreciate when a hero can get inside the mind of the villain. She knows all the tropes so that she's able to stay alive and keep one foot ahead of the villain, which makes her much more of a dynamic and interesting character. Also, I just like when horror franchises keep continuity and don't just kill off characters for the sake of killing them off. Looking at you, Halloween, killing off more than your fair share of main characters in the sequels just to kill them off. But Scream had such interesting characters because it have how self-aware it got, and having Sidney as your main character was such a charming breath of fresh air of, holy crap, this character is aware of the tropes that we are all aware of, and that's more or less what's keeping her alive. Everyone else around her may be stupid, but she actually has some common sense to her, adds some personality and charm. She feels like a real, actual person, and you get invested in the character and don't want to see her die. At number 2, we have the one character more than anybody else on this list that I really wouldn't want to mess with, and that is Ellen Ripley from the Alien franchise. Yeah, you don't want to mess with Sigourney Weaver's Ellen Ripley. Holy crap, even from the beginning with Alien 1, she was something different. She sets the standard for awesome last girl standing. Even from the get-go, she fights off a xenomorph. She gets cooler and cooler as the films progress, right up to that great fight in Aliens, where she has the mech suit, she's fighting the Queen. Granted, Aliens 3 and Aliens 4 were... but I don't blame the character of Ellen Ripley or even Sigourney Weaver for those. Those were just bad movies, but the character of Ellen Ripley is one of the greatest, not just horror heroines, but just movie heroes slash heroines in general. She has no fear. She stands up to aliens multiple times. She's just great. However, she's not number 1 to me. Like I said, this may be my personal list, but to me, the number 1 best horror movie hero of all time, to me, will always be Laurie Strode from the Halloween films. With a small caveat, honorable mention to both Jamie Lloyd from Halloween 4, 5, and partly 6, and Dr. Samuel Loomis from Halloweens 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. Both of those are great characters that actually kept the story going. But at the end of the day, Halloween is always about 2 things. Michael Myers, and in some way, shape, or form, Laurie Strode. Even when she's not in it, it's about either her niece or some family member, which the family thing is just weird, but getting back to the character of Laurie's great. She actually feels like a genuine character, a real person that you can actually empathize with. You could see yourself knowing a person just like that. Too often in horror films, there's characters that you could tell are just there to die. They don't feel like human characters. You're like, no one talks that way. No one acts that way. Laurie was one of the first characters, and a lot of people and directors followed this mold of her character of the last girl trope. More or less started with Laurie Strode from Halloween. She was average. She was normal. She was just a regular high school kid that always, to me, still to this day, looks more like a college kid, as is everyone else. But she seemed like a good high school kid. She was just a regular babysitter. She was just a normal kid. But even from the get-go, you wanted to see her survive. She also, from the get-go, wasn't dumb. Right from the first film, she fights off Michael Myers. When she's hiding in the closet, what does she do? She grabs a coat hanger, defends herself, stabs Michael in the eye. She stabs him in the neck with the knitting needle. She actually fights back right from the first one. She's smart up until the second one, even in her drugged up comatose state of being on painkillers and everything, other sedatives that they've fed her up in the hospital. You keep going, you get to H2O. Actually, she's the one stalking Michael in H2O. It's fantastic. There's a great trilogy to be made out of just Halloween, Halloween 2, and H2O. That can, in and of itself, could be a trilogy of following the arc and the growth of Laurie Strode. It's one of the few times in a horror film that they cared just as much about the main protagonist as they did about their villain. Michael Myers will always be a great force of evil. Laurie Strode went from a timid, awkward, but fairly normal and enjoyable character to a straight-up mama bear. I'm not afraid of you, Michael Myers. Come at me. I will finish you in H2O. And we seem to be getting more of that again in this new Halloween, which I'm really excited for. Some people are complaining that it just looks a lot too similar to H2O. But I personally enjoyed H2O. If we can get a hybrid between the original 1978 Halloween and H2O and make it in a modern setting, yes, I'm totally down for that. You notice how I glossed over all of Halloween Resurrection? What happens to Laurie Strode then? Yeah, let's not talk about that at all. What do you guys think? Who are the top 5 horror movie heroes to you guys? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like what you see and want to see more, subscribe to the channel or find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Uncharted Media. Stay sharp, movie guys and gals.